And I realized that's no way to live. And so, yeah, that's definitely, I got off all of my medications within 6 months of taking a more holistic route and exploring things with functional testing. And I realized, wait a second, this is the missing link for a lot of other people. And I'm
Yeah.
doing a disservice to my clientele by not having that as a part of my practice.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the first Optimal podcast. Really happy to have everybody here today. Excited for just another awesome guest. We have Maddy with us today. She is somebody who is definitely a unique blend of experiences and knowledge. So as we'll get into it today, she is a functional medicine uh, expert relative to several coaching certifications. She's applied it in her own journey, as well as many, many clients that she's helped. So we're going to unpack a lot of her methods, her tips, myths that she wants to debunk, and all of the above. But again, you can rest assured it's someone who has the appropriate credentials and went through the training. So a lot of things she's talking about have been vetted. She's also an IFBB pro. So not only is she applying this with clients, but she's personally put it to success at a very, very high level. So thanks so much for
Thanks,
joining
Joe.
us, Maddy. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be on.
Well, good stuff. I know a little bit about this, but just for the audience out there, can you talk a little bit about, how did you get into all this functional medicine health coaching, and you're doing a lot of really cool stuff, more advanced diagnostics and more high barrier kind of type coaching, because it's challenging to understand the sciences and the nuances of everybody individually. So I, applaud you for how much you've dug in your certifications and trainings, but can you kind of walk us through that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in a family that actually practiced natural medicine. My mom has never historically had us. Well, I had to get vaccinated for nursing, but never had been vaccinated prior to that. Homeopathic medicine through and through. So this was kind of like my ABCs. Now, when I had graduated from college, I was in the middle of a very severe eating disorder. I had lost literally about 50 pounds, was losing hair. I was put on birth control, antidepressants,
Mm,
Ritalin, a thyroid medication, and then I was on long-term laxatives. And I actually was suffering from kidney stones because I was on such a high protein diet.
mm,
So I had very much kind of rebelled against the naturopathic and homeopathic route, as any young kid would do when that's what their parents have pushed their whole life. And I decided, okay, I'm going to hire a coach, and I'm on all these medications now, and I'm going to get through to the other side of this. So I hired a coach, had no intention on stepping onto a bodybuilding stage. That led into a 4.5, 5 year career as a bodybuilder, where I climbed my way up as an IFBB pro. And that coach definitely had more of the if it fits your macros style of approach, right? So I'm about a year and a half into this journey with this one coach, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I've healed myself from my eating disorder. I'm on super high doses of all of these prescription medications, and I have more problems than ever. And
mhm.
so that is when everything shifted for me. I realized that just because you're now at a healthy weight and your blood markers are, so-called optimal, and my doctors had nothing negative to say, that I still felt terrible. And I realized there's got to be a middle ground here, because every time we would go into a naturopath's office, they would look at my perfectly healthy mom and would treat her like she was on her deathbed. That was
Mm,
their job, right? Naturopaths are seeking not only for you to be like optimal, but like for you to be basically like not human, it feels like
sure.
at times. So I was like, this is just a money laundering business, and I want to make sure that I find that middle ground. So I went back,
Sure.
I got 3 different board certifications. I know you and I have a lot of this similarities there with our different credentials and background. And I used myself as my own guinea pig. And that basically, in a nutshell, is where I now am at, where I like to kind of integrate the holistic and natural side of things also with a scientific, evidence-based allopathic lens as well.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's good stuff. And then when you first started coaching, was it this full comprehensive approach when you started working with clients, or was it, you're starting with maybe more of the bodybuilding of focus and then you added that later? Like, how was that part of your program coming
Well,
together?
yeah, great question. I actually, when I first began, obviously I only knew all that I knew, which
Mhm.
was here's your macros, get your, if you've got a weight loss problem, you've got an issue with eating. If you've got a weight loss problem, you're probably not exercising enough. I was like a lot of the coaches that are out there right now.
Sure.
Um, and then I realized, wait a second, here I am, like I said, quote unquote, healthy on paper, relative, healthy BMI. I'm going to the bathroom once every other day, which seems to be normal. I'm on a lot of medications, but I feel okay.
Sure.
Um, and I realized that's no way to live. And so, yeah, that's definitely, I got off all of my medications within 6 months of taking a more holistic route and exploring things with functional testing. And I realized, wait a second, this is the missing link for a lot of other people. And I'm
Yeah.
doing a disservice to my clientele by not having that as a part of my practice.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I just had a gut health expert on the other day. That episode will be coming out soon. And it was interesting. She identified, I forgot the percent of people prescribed a certain medication. And then there was another, it was something close to like 80% of the people just have like this one thing that shows up on their GI map, like their gut health, that if they solve that, 80% of the people that are on said medication for their issues, it goes away. And it was just really interesting, because it's more of it's not that there's anything inherently bad about it. It's just it's a sick care model. So if you're trying to get
Mm-hmm.
optimization out of a sick care model, it's like having mom's minivan and you're trying to race it on the weekends. Like it's not built for
Right.
that. That's not what it's designed for. So you need to get yourself a hot rod or a muscle car or
Mm-hmm.
a super sport. Like that's what you need if you're going to be doing the elite racing. And that's what more functional medicine, concierge based, optimization focused providers and or clinicians, are out there for, which is, as you well know. So one thing you did mention though is there's a lot out there, right? There's a lot of uh, different coaching buzz, different things trending at different times, all that stuff. So I wonder if we could walk through first and unpack maybe some common myths or misconceptions that are out there for the audience listening in, so they can kind of walk away and say, oh, okay, when I see that, that's kind of what it's mean. And I think we can open up with, if there's just one myth that you wish would disappear relative to like hormone issues
Mm-hmm.
out there, especially for women, but anything that comes to mind, if we could unpack that.
Yeah. So I do work with a majority of female cases. I work with women that are anywhere from honestly 17, 18 years old all the way up through their 70s. But it's so crazy. I will have women who are dealing with so evidently hormonal imbalances, and OBGYNs are taught, you and I talked about this on the call that we previously had with one another. You can't blame the medical practitioner because they are taught, and I learned this in nursing school, you're only taught so much. You only have X amount of years to get so much information. So
Mhm.
you're given a very like, if a patient comes in displaying symptoms A through F, take option A approach, right?
Mhm.
There's not A through Z approaches. So the number one misconception that I think we could talk about in the context of female health is really that birth control is the thing that fixes hormonal issues.
Mm.
I hear a lot with patients coming in. I went on the pill to fix my period or my bloating, or for me, I was on birth control at the age of 12 for cystic acne. But
Mm.
hormonal birth control doesn't fix imbalances. What it does is it overrides our natural system. So
Mhm.
it shuts down ovulation. It gives you a withdrawal bleed, which for anybody listening is not a real period. And it masks deeper issues. You could be dealing with PCOS. And remember, PCOS too, it can have three different causes. We can have adrenal driven PCOS, blood sugar related PCOS. You can have, it can mask estrogen dominance that's left unaddressed, or even detoxification issues. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but that can be explored through a Dutch test. The point is, it doesn't address why your hormones were off in the first place. And then I have a lot of women who, they come in, they're used to working with a macro-based coach, and they'll say, oh, by the way, I got off my birth control next week. And I'm sitting behind my desk like, oh no, we didn't run labs or anything like that. I pretty much know what labs are going to say when someone comes off of the pill. But for our listeners out there, birth control does more than just affect your hormones. It actually depletes a lot of key nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, things like B vitamins, zinc, magnesium. And these are actually what all help to balance our hormones. So when you come off birth control, a lot of women are surprised to feel completely out of body and to feel like a completely different person. All of their symptoms come back, and they come back worse. Again, doesn't mean that birth control is bad here, but it shouldn't be sold or marketed as a fix for things. I like to say to my clients, you can't balance your hormones in a vacuum. We have to focus on nutrition and functional medicine, because that's at the crux of true hormonal healing, not just symptom suppression.
Yeah. And for those, what exactly, I know there's different combinations, but generally what is like a common birth control cocktail, if you will, that you see, and what is it doing to a patient who's on that? Like what is it shutting down specifically hormone wise?
Well, I think a lot of women think that just because they're having, this is something that I see a lot of times with younger females. They see, we're giving the body either synthetic progestins, or we're giving them like a mini pill with a low dose of hormonal estrogen, or a combination pill of both. Right. And what this is doing is it's shutting down the body's natural hormonal cascade. And it's, like I said, it's preventing ovulation and causing that withdrawal bleed when we go on those sugar pills, or not even creating a bleed at all in many cases, depending on whether you're on a certain like IUD, or whether you skip your sugar pills, which no one should be doing. Long story short, we think, and a lot of young women are believe falsely, that if you are having that bleed, that you can still get off of it and conceive like that. And more often than not, you can't. And whether that's because your body has been depleted of key vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, whether it's because your birth control has now created, and this can happen, it's birth control driven PCOS. You now have an inflammatory condition due to the introduction of birth control in your system for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Or whether you are a lot like me, I was under fueling, over exercising, and on birth control, thought I was healthy, but I'd created amenorrhea for myself. Just because you're bleeding doesn't mean that you are ovulating. So things to think about.
Yeah. And generally, I know we're painting with a broad brush here, but generally, how long do you typically see somebody to bounce back? How long does it take to replenish those micronutrients maybe they're short on, or to start to see if they're doing a lot of the right things, if you will, to kind of bring things back online? Generally, how long does it take?
I would say, so for me, I'm going to be completely honest, I'm the longest case I think I've ever worked with, which was 3 years. And I've literally never experienced that in my life. Now, granted, during that time, I was going through preps and all of those things. Most of the patients I'm working with are not. I think that you could pretty much be feeling 100% balanced in under 12 months. I would say like 6 to 8 is probably a sweet spot. Everybody is different though. The longer that I've done this, the more easily it is it's easier for me to predict exactly what's been depleted and how we're going to need to supplement, especially if I know going in how long you've been on your birth control. And the other thing too, Joe, I'm sure you know this, is what is the patient's diet and nourishment practices and even training already like going into this
Right.
sort of next phase. As we pull the birth control, if they already have a really great foundation of nourishment practices, stress management, sleep hygiene, all that kind of stuff, it's going to be an easier transition.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great message out there where you just, hey, give yourself a year. Like
Mm-hmm.
and it's gonna be some work, right? So you might have to do some different testing. You might have to do some additional follow-up testing, but don't think of it in that short window, right? Is what I encourage people to do is I'd encourage them to think of it big picture for the rest of your life, having some of these things corrected and just feeling so much better long term. I try to often
Mm-hmm.
just display at the risk of sounding like a salesman with wordplay here. It's like you have to look at cost versus investment. Like cost is like something you hope works, not really scientifically valid. It's a thingamajigger. It's like I'm just going to buy something and it goes down in value or
Mm-hmm.
deteriorates. An investment is something that is proven to work and it gives you a return rather quickly, but it compounds over time. So I try to like reframe that with a lot of my friends that are thinking about doing more optimization type therapies or an approach like that with a coach, with nutrition, with pharmacology. And I'm like, you really have to reframe your mind because you're so built into the American sick care model. Again, not that it's bad, it has utility. If I break my arm, like it's a great system.
Exactly.
If I'm in a disease state, it's a great system. If I'm looking to be optimal, it's not, but that's not to demonize it. It's not built to do that. So that's why I try to tell people like,
Yeah.
let's not, we're not bashing providers, we're not bashing the medical system. It's the system itself is not designed to do what you're trying to make it do. And so once people reframe that and they understand like, oh, this isn't a cost, it's an investment, and I'm not losing something because my insurance doesn't cover it. It's like, yeah, that's a model. It's a different model for that. So I
Joe, you bring
digress.
up two. No, no, no. You actually bring up two really good points there. Point number one, I actually just had right before we hopped on this call, I was emailing back and forth with one of my clients who has Crohn's, her gastroenterologist. And
Mm,
he was just saying, wow, I had a chance to read through all your protocols, and I wish that I had the time to invest in each of my patients in this way. And I want to make it very clear for any listener out there that you and I think I can speak on your behalf, we do not have our backs up against conventional practitioners and medical
sure.
doctors. In fact, we work with them.
Mm,
But there's like this appreciation, and I hope that this becomes more commonplace in this space. But there's this appreciation for they have the know-how and the ability to call in things when patients need them and to do those types of more, different types of testing than we
sure.
do. But that appreciation is mutual a lot of the
Mhm.
times. Doctors don't think that we're quacks, especially with a lot of the science and the evidence that's now coming out with some of these functional tests. I had a patient that told me she was very misinformed, as a lot of us are. I can raise my hand and say that I was right at the forefront of that for
Sure.
the longest time. And she said, a GI map, that's so expensive. There's no way I'm going to be able to do that. She said, I'm just going to go through, she said, I would want to just take the route that my gastroenterologist has recommended. My copay, I think it was like $100 or something like that. She
Sure.
said that she was just going to go get a colonoscopy. And we got on a one-on-one. I said, before you do it, please just hear me out. I just want to explain to you that a colonoscopy is not going to replace what a GI map with
Does.
zonulin is going to show
Right.
us. And I pulled it up. I literally spent 60 minutes with her on the phone, going through a mock protocol for a client. And she immediately was like, oh my gosh, I could do 6 colonoscopies over the next year with doctors spinning their wheels and saying, oh, you need a PPI, or you need just more Metamucil or Benefiber or whatever it may be. And I'm realizing all of that comes with a cost. It's less shocking, right? It's just less sticker shock because we're spending $30 here, $90
Right.
here, $100 for this copay here, but you're going to wind up paying more.
Way more, way more. I think it's a brilliant point because, you know, y- you basically poop in a box and ship it in. It's not very sexy to market it, but it's like, and it's, between, depending on how many markers, like $400 to $600 ish, depending on, the extensive of it. So it's very hard to market that on TikTok in a quick 20-second video. However, I guess
Yeah.
you could get creative with how you do that. these little thises and that's like, oh, I have my antacids and I got my copay that I do, once, twice a year. And then I got my fiber mix. Going back to my analogy of like cost versus investment, that's a cost. Because once you stop taking that fiber mix or you run out of it, it doesn't add value anymore. It deteriorated, right? The value of it's now gone. But if you did like a test, that value explodes over time because you have this deep insight, and then you can make a year-long protocol. Many of those things are free or included in just your normal grocery shopping and lifestyle modifications. Many, depending on the extreme responses, but eventually there's other things you can simply modify. And yeah, I think you're spot on, because $50 here, $50 there every couple of weeks, you spent that in
And
3-4
not to
months, and
mention,
you're still not solving it. But yeah.
not to mention, there's this phenomenon that occurs where we almost get like apprehensive or nervous to get on the supplements that we've been on for 4, 6, 9, 12, 24 months, and we don't even know are working anymore. But what you'll find with a majority of people, again, I fell victim to this for a very long time, is we'll be on something. Someone could ask, why are you on it? Or what purpose is it serving? And we can't even articulate what it's doing at that point. But we've added in the last year 5, 6, 7, 8 more things to our arsenal. Now, in contrast, you do a GI map, you actually can't stay on the prescriptive therapy for certain things for longer than 6 to 8 weeks at a time. The intent of a protocol to follow a lot of these functional tests is you go on for a short period of time. We awaken, we open detox pathways, we clear the junk out, we awaken your system so it can start doing what it's engineered to do all along, and then we get off those things.
Right. No, I think you're spot on. And the other thing we were talking about yesterday, and I want to last point, I promise, because this was a big talking point of my last podcast as well. But we were talking about like difference between different type of probiotics and how some of them could literally be doing next to nothing for somebody because the types of bacteria in there were already good, and they're just taking more of the good stuff, and you're already at capacity. Or the difference between a pancreatic enzyme and a digestive enzyme. And that was an interesting discussion we had, because it's like, oh, best of intentions, I'm in Whole Foods or fill in a blank place, and it's like, oh, I'm going to buy this because I saw it. That's right. And again, we're not knocking anybody for that. It's just that's the whole reason for pausing and testing, because, oh, it didn't work for me. It's kind of like the person who doesn't weigh food but say they struggle with weight loss. I'm not being mean or anything when I say this, but like you don't. That's like tracking your weight loss without a scale, right? Like weighing yourself. You have to know like what generally a ballpark of what you're putting in, and similar to that with your protocols. But
yeah, absolutely.
I did want to tackle that just kind of, I guess, on the topic of weight gain. There's a lot from a physics standpoint. Obviously, energy cannot be neither created or destroyed, as we know. One of the laws of physics just changes form. So we have the form of food, we have the form of fat, we have the form of energy and muscle. We breathe it out. We, goes out the other ends, and when we're done with it, and so on, the byproducts. But so there's, from a physics standpoint, that makes sense. But in practical application, everyday life, can you talk a little bit about weight gain isn't just about calories in and out, kind of the nuances there, essentially how that, how does that work in one's approach related to hormones and
absolutely.
dysfunction?
100%. More often than not, the chief reason why people are coming in to work with me is not because they've identified a hormonal imbalance, but it's because they have a weight problem. And usually people are saying, yeah, but I want your help with accountability. I want your help with consistency. I don't think I'm training hard enough. Or I think that I am being loosey-goosey with my diet. And while calorie balance, as you referenced, Joe, certainly matters. We have to take that into account as one of the foundational components of weight loss. Hormones really dictate how your body is using calories, right? So we can reference things like high cortisol, whether that's from stress, whether it's from blood sugar dysregulation, whether it's from overtraining. That can all lead to fat retention, especially I call it the fat tire phenomenon, where you have that, like, I used to see it on myself when I would wear like the Calvin Kleins that squeezed your waist. It's like you hang right over it. Poor thyroid function. Thyroid is something I could go on forever about, we see a lot of endocrinologists that love to run the good old T3 and TSH, and
Right.
you're fine is what they usually say. But you can have, subclinical hypothyroidism, or even clinically with, hypothyroidism, uh, and it can be left unchecked or
Sure.
swept under the rug by only looking at TSH and free T3. But poor thyroid function will slow your metabolism, and that will lead to not only weight gain, but also fatigue, even if you're in a calorie deficit. And then calorie deficits, just to note here, would also worsen that, right? Because we know that carbohydrates are the thing that convert your unusable form of T4 into T3, which is what the body uses. So I see a lot of times these women that are frustrated spinning their wheels, unknowingly hypothyroid, and undercutting carbohydrates, and they don't know that they're digging their body deeper into the ground. And then we also have insulin resistance as a major problem, which is common in either PCOS, or chronic overtraining or chronic dieting, which means that your body is going to store more fat from the same amounts and same types of food. So yeah, the equation matters, but the state of your hormones is what changes the math.
Yeah, and I think one of the points I want to bring out to anybody out there that's like, well, you just said physics. I'm like, the reality is the only successful caloric deficit diet research, generally speaking, I'm going to say that I know of, is been in a metabolic ward where they control it 100%. What happens when people go out in real life, or they're working with a coach, a dietitian, etc., they can report, some studies show, up to 60 or 70% off of their caloric intake. Not because they're lying, not because they're bad people. It's just I there's a couple of reasons why, but that's a fact. So in other words, I reported my trainer, coach, dietitian, fill in the blank, said 2,000 calories. I'll be at a 500 deficit. I need 2,500. I'm solid. I report 2,000. But if I'm off by say 50%, I ate 3,000. So I was actually at 500 calorie surplus. Ooh, well, how does that happen? Well, a big thing is, you just mentioned it. If those hormones are off, or so far off, like your insulin sensitivity is off, things of that nature, those are so powerful. I don't care who you are. Like I said, unless you are just a robot, you're going to walk through the break room and grab that little handful of candy, or you're going to overeat just that little bit, and not intentionally, but unless you literally weighed it and that's all that was there and there was no other stuff on the table, like it's impossible. Like, this is how biology made us, that when these hormones are uh amped up so high, that the body's going like, I need food now, no question. And you don't even remember it, you don't even realize it. And that's not my opinion, that's what's in the research, that's what's in the application in the real world when they're not in a controlled setting. So I guess my point in that is, don't beat yourself up if a diet failed, because it could just be the approach you're taking, as well as you got a bunch of hormones. It's like you're spinning in the wind, and it's an uphill
Mhm.
battle. So you can run some testing and figure that out. And I think the T3 T4 example is really really a great one, because if your thyroid's not optimal, normal isn't optimal, right? But if your thyroid's not optimal, right, like again, it's working against you. And a lot of people don't know
Mhm.
how the gut and the liver work in that thyroid function as well, if those are inefficient, because you're like, well, I just have these markers, what do I do? Well, there's testing to
Oh
figure
my
that out.
gosh, yeah, the number of people that are like, I have a lady I'm working with right now who has Hashimoto's, and I was like, we need to do a GI map. We need to do a GI map. And she's like, I don't have a gut problem. I go to the bathroom every single day. I said, 99% of the time when I have someone with Hashis, there's a gut problem. Sure enough, we've got her. She's been on thyroid medication for, I think, 30 plus years. We got her completely off of it. No signs of Hashis, but it's like, you got to start there. Now, you did bring up a good point. There's a lot of, you could probably see it on, my Instagram page, or even other coaches. A big talk point of coaches that deal with metabolic systems and weight loss is, hey, look at this client and their starting point A, and look at this client and their ending point B. They lost body fat eating more calories. And there's a phenomenon that I can reference called a reverse diet.
Mhm.
And essentially during this process, we're slowly increasing food, we're slowly pulling back on cardio, and energy expenditure. And what this is doing is it's basically telling the body, it's okay, breathe.
Mm,
You can drop body fat. You don't need to be in such a stress state. And this can do wonders for the entire body's ability to reach hormesis, which is that state of internal balance. And it can do a lot for ghrelin and leptin, our hunger hormones. But I will say, again, I hate to throw out numbers, but about 90% of the time, the way that we have gotten somebody to lose body fat eating more is because we didn't skip a very crucial and important step, which is some type of optimization there in the mix.
yep.
If I have Kathy that's losing body fat, but she's losing body fat literally cooking every single meal from home. She's the type that goes to Disney or orders a green salad with grilled chicken and eats it dry. And she has a fiber one bar for breakfast in the morning and then eats an apple for dinner because she didn't have a chance to work out, and she's happy because she at least lost half a pound on the scale the next day. There's something wrong. You should not have to eat in such a controlled fashion and get calories so low just to see a half a pound of weight loss. That is a telltale sign that your body is not functioning optimally.
Right. Right. And as you know, as I'm sure we'll get into as we start to navigate some of the other testing out there and get into weeds, but this term inflammation is thrown around a lot, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think a lot of people that are not seeing it day to day or looking at these reports maybe don't understand the different applications. So I know of someone who recently did a not a like aggressive like liver detox program that they bought off the shelf. Like, it was a thoughtful protocol that there were some things that were identified in the test to improve liver function. 3.5 pounds down. Did they lose 3.5 pounds of fat? No. So we're talking weight loss versus fat loss, right? They did lose some fat loss because that's part of their journey. So they were just naturally going to lose it. But the amount of bloat, if you will, inflammation, internal stuff that just wasn't being cleared by the liver, that just already in a short period of time already started to like move. And they're like, I feel a little different. Like, it's not like I'm jacked. Like, I just pounded an energy drink, feel different, but I just feel a little different, And so I think you're spot on with that optimization part, because that's often, I'm really glad you pointed that out, because that's often not highlighted, or maybe, it's kind of like you see the big picture and it's like, hey, while eating, I lost weight before and after, or whatever the thing is. And then you're not reading in the caption the details of like, this is what they did. There's a lot of legwork.
Oh, and there's nothing more than I love either. This happens a lot for me, especially these days, is I will have women that come to me and they're like, it's almost like they can't even hear the functional, they don't even care. It's like, I just need to get these 10 pounds off. Right. And sometimes, Joe, to be honest, they'll maintain the exact same weight, but they'll go down from a size 6 to a size 2. And they're like, we'll get to a place where we can finally go into a fat loss phase. And I'll say, okay, so, what does your external environment look like? What are your stressors like? You think you're in a good spot for fat loss now? Calories are at a good spot. Internal health is optimized. And they'll say, I don't want it. I think I'm good here. I'm eating more food than ever. I fit in my clothes. And I just share that little, testimony to say, I know how it can feel like you're kind of grasping at thin air or whatever you possibly can. I just need to get the weight off. Sometimes it's a weight problem, right? Sometimes it's an inflammation problem. It's not always a fat issue. Yeah, if you have an inflammatory problem, you're probably also going to have a fat problem, an issue with storing adipose tissue and losing it. But the impact that inflammation can have is profound. Think about if you've ever gone to a ramen restaurant, right? And you ordered some ramen and the next day you got up and you can see your sheets on your skin and your rings don't fit. You feel like crap.
Yeah.
I mean, and imagine waking up every single day like that.
Yeah. That's someone's new normal, right? For a lot of people out there. So no, that's a great point. I mean, I think the one point I just want to bring up before we transition to our next topic here is, one of the people that I really connected with early in my life in a different industry was Dave Ramsey. So he has like Financial Peace University. And one of his sayings was like, find someone with the heart of a teacher. Like, if it's a lawyer you're hiring, make sure they have a heart of a teacher. If they're an accountant, heart of a teacher. I would tell people that same for a coach. Because if you go, I'm going to pay X and I want to lose 10 pounds, I'm going to pay X to lose 10 pounds. You're grossly under approaching the value proposition of who you're about to hire. Instead of, that's one of the things I want to do is lose 10 pounds by hiring this coach, but also, do they have the heart of a teacher so I can learn this to apply for the rest of my life? I'm 47 years old. I want to live 40 more years, whatever the case is. Now you have that knowledge for the rest of time. So similar to you, as you can hear as you're explaining it, you have the heart of a teacher. You've done the legwork to learn this stuff, and you're breaking stuff down for people. So just for some encouragement out there, sometimes it's needed to pause, invest in yourself, get some education, do some testing, work with a coach with the heart of a teacher, so that you can apply that to life, long term. So
I appreciate that. I actually ask in my intake forms, physique related goal, internal health related goal, mindset goal, and then knowledge based goal. Tell me what you want to learn
perfect.
throughout our term. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. All right, let's get into another topic here. So you quote I'm going to read: "You cannot balance your hormones in a vacuum. Nutrition and functional medicine are the foundation of true hormonal healing, not just symptom suppression." Can you kind of unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, of course. I think one of the things that I had to learn the hard way was that food is information. It's not just fuel. I referenced when we first opened up this podcast, a time when I was working with a coach, and I was really taking a more if it fits your macros based approach. And for those that may not know exactly what that is, it's where you're kind of eating whatever, right? I was eating cookies and I was eating Bear Bells protein bars and Fairlife shakes and Halo Top ice cream. And my macros fit. The carbs checked out, the calories checked out. But every bite that you eat, it sends a chemical message to your body. Nutrients are what regulate our, hormonal production, our metabolism, and even the detoxification of hormones. And I'm talking things like estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, fiber, right? Fiber is like the Velcro for excess estrogen to be eliminated through fecal matter and even toxins in our body. So if you're eating all these, high protein snack foods and you're not getting any veggies in your diet, you're probably also bogged down by toxins and excess estrogen. And then if you're not eating things like fats or proteins or micronutrients, your body doesn't have the raw materials that it needs to produce hormones in the first place, right? It's like showing up to an empty plot of land with, I'm not a construction worker, but like balsa wood, like you're not going to build a house with balsa. You need some other types of wood and raw materials, concrete, things like that to build a sturdy house. So, if you have someone who's got low protein intake, for example, that means you're probably also going to have low amino acids. Amino acids are derived from protein. And as a result, I'll see things like low neurotransmitter production. Usually on a Dutch test, this is going to manifest itself in low serotonin, low dopamine, and low
Can
hormones.
I pause you there? With low serotonin, low dopamine, like what would someone feel if they had that? You know what I mean?
Depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, depressed. They would feel like maybe they don't have the drive or that oomph. We get serotonin and dopamine, like I said, from our diet, but also from managing stress. And a lot of our serotonin and dopamine is produced in our gut. So balancing out the gut is key there. But what you consume is important too.
No, I think it's a great point, and I didn't mean to pause you because I just wanted to emphasize that because certainly there's application for certain mental health therapies, things of that nature. However, admittedly, by even general practitioners out there, many of them are prescribed because that's the only tool in the toolbox. And then they may do something like this and correct gut health or correct something like that, and they may not need it anymore. That doesn't mean just stop your meds and go buy the first thing off the counter to do a detox of your gut. That's not what we're talking about. Like when we say detox, we're not talking of like a one bottle, one size fits all product. We're talking about an individualized approach, right? Just but I think that's a really important to think about those things because there's other things going on that there are symptom relief solutions out there for. They're not root cause corrections, right? And then the second thing I just wanted to bring up to think about, because I was thinking about a client when you're talking, is if you're depressed, low energy, brain fog, the neurotransmitters lower, all the things you mentioned, are you going to move more, less or more throughout your day?
Yeah.
Less.
Yeah.
I had a client tell me, they said, this is going to sound dumb. I was like, no, go ahead. And they're like, well, I just don't have the energy to even like take my dog for a walk. Like I'm trying to get these steps in and I just can't do it. I said, yeah, I'm looking at your test. I wouldn't have the energy either. Stop beating yourself up. They're like you almost see like welling up like little tears, like, oh my gosh, and not only that, not only your hormones, completely trash, but now psychologically you are just condemning yourself. And it's because you don't have the raw materials to get your butt up and go walk. Like you're not like you could just see the name calling in her head as she's processing it out loud. Like, oh, I'm a loser. I'm a failure. I'm lazy. Right. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Stop beating yourself up. Like, yeah, if everything's clean, like, let's fix these things. And then there's a level of accountability there, but you're like a 10 and we need like 1. But if you don't have the raw materials to do those things, activity level is going to go down, your energy expenditure go down, therefore it's harder to lose weight. And those are those like, hidden calories, if we wanted to make it a trending topic,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing, Joe, on the topic of like raw materials is fats.
Mm,
I see girls all the time who they live, young women too, in this constant state of fight or flight. I like to think of like, I know a lot of people probably can't see me live, but if you saw what my hands are doing, I'm motioning to like this almost like grounding, anchoring, rooting mechanism of fats.
mhm,
If you're feeling unstable, you're feeling fight or flighty, you're feeling anxious, do me a favor and put some coconut oil or some ghee in a couple of your meals this week, because fats are what our body uses to synthesize things like estrogen and progesterone,
mhm.
which both, if either are out of balance, you're going to feel out of balance. And fats are also a very grounding food. They're the number one thing that supports our adrenal output and function. Nutrients, like I said, nutrients really, really, really matter here.
Yeah, no, for sure. I want to transition to like fitness strategies. So I'm just curious, in your
Yeah.
experience, any fitness or health strategies that you feel are underutilized that could be impacted if we start with that first. Like, what are some fitness strategies you think are underutilized that could really be a big impact for people? They could apply right after this podcast, perhaps. What are some things that come to mind?
100%. Yeah, well, one, they can't directly apply immediately after, but they can through
Sure.
working with us. But the first that comes to mind is definitely nervous system support and functional movement. Something that I
Mm,
neglected for probably about the first 5 years of my health and fitness journey. I'm a high intensity girl. If you watch my stories on Instagram, I'm snatching, I'm doing cleans, I'm doing, hit workouts right now. I'm training for a high rock, so it comes with
sure.
the territory. But
Cool.
as women, we glorify more, more restriction, more cardio, more lifting. But what I see over and over again is eventual burnout, stagnation, and hormonal dysregulation. The missing link here really is that functional movement practice and nervous system regulation. So what I mean by that is the stuff that's not really flashy, the stuff that is actually going to build our resilience and our longevity long term, but it's usually we're not like feeling like we're on top of the world after doing
Yeah.
it type of stuff. You can still do the stuff that makes you feel like the Lion King, but you need to pair it with breath work or box breathing. My clients are always surprised when this is in their training program. They're like, what the heck is box breathing or legs
Right.
up on wall? I'm like, just click it. Walking outdoors, I make it an intentional practice every single day. I take 2 long walks. I do a 45-minute walk at dusk, and I do a 15-minute walk in the morning to start my day. But I bring just my keys with me on that morning walk. No distractions. Just regulate and ground your nervous system. Downshifting after workouts. This was huge for me. I used to be a morning workout girl. I would go in the morning, fasted, come home, I would get my protein iced coffee, and I would dive into work. So immediately, high cortisol from the workout, which you need and you want.
Right.
But then caffeine, So nothing to shunt that cortisol response, and then immediately into a stress state. So now I work out in the evenings. I have that 45-minute walk at dusk after that workout. Immediately turns my starts to shunt that cortisol. And then mobility and dynamic warm-ups, dynamic movement is amazing, not only for joints and range of motion, but also for our longevity, for our cortisol, for shuttling and partitioning nutrients. You know, you don't have to always choose, like I say, between being strong and being well. Yeah. We have to find a way to integrate both.
Yeah. No, it's so spot on, because gosh, it was way too late in my training journey that I realized how much I needed like more functional movements and mobility and the downshift, if you will. Like when all the reps in reserve literature came out, I'm just like, did you ever see Dorian Yates? Like that was like, I grew up as a kid where it was just like all the hardcore training to where that was the compliment in the gym is like, I'm like, what the heck's a top set? I'm like, I do 3 top sets. What do you mean a top set? I do 3 hard sets. And I'm like, it wasn't like literally, somewhat recent. And if you look at 30 odd years of training, probably the last 6 or so, I got smarter because I just kept getting worn out, but my CNS was fried, hips tight, back, all that stuff, to where now it's like, I'll have like younger guys come up and be like, hey man, you're a pretty big guy, like, I haven't seen you touch a weight. I'm like, bro, you haven't been here long enough. Like, you got to give me 45 minutes to warm up, And so, like it went from an hour and a half of lifting to 30 minutes of lifting, but the other hour is restorative and correction and waking things up, like those underactive muscles, just to get everything organized. But I'm getting us off track.
Well, and again, it's not, no, I really appreciate that. I think it's sometimes even more common with men, right? I hear guys all the time, like, oh, I don't take a rest day. I really struggle with that. As a female, especially with the way that I'm wired in business and in life, I very much get that gratification from doing more. And so to be honest, if I didn't have a coach that was giving me the permission before I could give the permission to myself, like sometimes, my mom always tells me, you just have to do it scared. And that was a moment in my journey where I just had to kind of trust and do it scared. I had to trust that actually doing less was going to pay off. But it can really help to have someone in your corner that you say, you know what, she might have something, I actually might believe her. And so I'm going to give it a try. Right. Sometimes you have to lean on someone for that support, and that's okay. To keep us moving along here, I know you had asked if there was anything else, and I want to point out something else that I don't think should be left untouched here in the context of your question. That is peptide therapy. Mm-hmm. Vastly underutilized strategy, particularly in the context of recovery and inflammation and healing. Some come to mind that I personally have used. I've used BPC 157 and TB 500 when I had surgery. It was insane how quickly I was able to heal. And my surgeon had commented, he's like, what did you do? And I was like, well, I focused on my diet, polyphenol rich foods, and then I took these peptides. Right. KPV, amazing for inflammation and gut brain health. And then after my whole bout of thyroid problems, I had a lot, and I actually had this is a side note, but I had a huge issue with my previous apartment that I lived at. I went through litigation and everything. And due to the stress of that, I lost a lot of hair. I went on GHKCU and, amazing for whether you've got skin issues, tissue repair issues, or even recovery from just stress or overtraining. Amazing. My hair was like growing like a weed. If you're using peptides and these are not, from the black market, and they're legally prescribed and they're under the guidance of a practitioner, they can really accelerate healings and support the body in ways that training or diet alone simply can't.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've seen the application of all of the above effectively be used at the right time. And I think I actually have an article on our website it's not my research. So it's not, yes, I'm biased, obviously, to prescription solutions, but it's not my research, to be clear. But there's, it shows the difference between like human grade versus research grade, prescription grade versus, research grade, and the, not only the raw materials, but the methods that are used to create both, and the controlled environment that they must be made in a compounding pharmacy versus a Bob's basement, who knows, or which is true. They're not friends of mine, but I do know people that literally just made out of their house and had pretty decent sized businesses, which is scary. But I don't want to turn into a podcast episode, because I could go on a rant about that, because I sat through like a 4-hour lecture of this guy, just all the top research grade companies. He had all the testing done on it, and he did this huge presentation, and it was just mind blowing. But anyways, I digress. But I did want to mention, though, like a little bit about some of these recovery therapies. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of strong, human-based trials to show the efficacy, but there's tons of anecdotal evidence. But one of the things that I even instills more confidence than the just tons of people I've seen get benefits from it is when you look at the science. So I have a good friend who's a PhD in, I would say, biology/physiology. I don't know the exact title of it, but he actually does blood flow restriction training. So he's an expert in that. And he talks about the VEGF in blood flow restriction therapies. If you look it up, so vascular endothelial growth factor. So that hormone, the way it actually works, is amped up in the body through blood flow restriction training. It's very, very similar to what BPC does. And so one of the things that, we've kind of brought up was if you're using both those therapies to drive that hormone. But if you look at how that hormone works, it's really, really interesting, because then you start to learn how much bro science there is about how people take BPC that just doesn't add up. Like injecting it into the injury, you don't have to do that, because that's not the way that that actual hormone that does the repair works. It's systemic. So I just found that interesting. I don't want to get too in the weeds on that, but because I'll just keep babbling. But I was just really blown away when we started to dive into the research together for his product. And I said, wait a minute, like these are the same hormones that are triggered by some of these other peptide therapies. And one that stuck out in my mind was the BPC. And so there's not a direct.
Well, and there's also too, just sorry to interrupt you, Joe.
No, go ahead.
I didn't know if you're, there's different, there's different applications to different peptides. There's different modalities of taking them or of applying them. There's, different dosages to use. So it's definitely not something where you just want to kind of chat GPT, hey, how much should I be taking of this? Without understanding, the number of people too that I've seen who get, this is also me getting off track, so I'm going to pull a joke here. No, but there's also people who, they reconstitute them improperly. If you're reconstituting on your own, like you can completely nullify the efficacy of a peptide by shaking it or by putting the bariostatic water in there, all the things. And so it's like, you got to have a practitioner to help you walk you through all this stuff.
Right. And if it's on the shelf and you get it super fast, that should be a first sign of a red flag, because most of these things have a very, very short shelf life, if you will, for as far as like how well that compound is actually the viability of that compound stays intact. It starts to degenerate and get weaker the longer it's sitting, in someone's basement on a shelf or maybe a storefront. But anyways, I could, like I said, kind of keep rambling on with that one for sure. So conversely, you were talking earlier though about the person that's overdoing it. So they don't really have an issue, I think, with like consistency, besides being consistent with recovery, I guess they do. But what would you say to like a mindset shift for someone who's trying to, I got work, I got kids, I got these hormone issues, I'm overweight, I've been beat up, struggling. How do I get consistent? What mindset shift could help me start taking these steps forward?
I get excited about this question. I lead team calls for my athletes and I do them every other week. And last week we talked about, for the busy mom, kids are going back to school, or the young girl who's bidding adieu to summer vacations, and how to just kind of like get it all together. And this is exactly what I told them. I said, number one, get clear on what you actually want is the first thing. Number two, get clear on what you're truly willing to do to get there. Not what sounds good on paper, not what someone else is chasing, but your goals, your priorities, and then most importantly, your capacity. with every single goal, there's going to be an opportunity cost. I recently just went through a 12-week, pretty hardcore dieting phase for a photo shoot that I was doing. And let me tell you, there were days, Joe, I would be asked out on a date. I would have friends that went out for birthdays. We had 4th of July, and I ate my meal prep, and I didn't have a single sip of alcohol. If you're focused on building strength, you might need to give up the F45 classes. None of it is wrong, but you got to be honest with yourself about the trade-offs so you can stop breaking those promises to yourself. It really sounds so good. I love to say like, oh, I'll do better tomorrow. I'll do better tomorrow. But saying you're going to do better the next day, it's not going to move the needle. What I tell people who are struggling with consistency, or tell myself as kind of the detective that's going in to support these people, is where is the kink in our hose, right? Where is the bottleneck in our system? It could be metabolic, it could be hormonal, it could be digestive, but it could also just be logistical. And that's sometimes what we need to find. There's no amount of willpower that's going to override, a body or even a mindset that doesn't feel safe, supported, or self-motivated. We get consistent when we get clear. Yeah. So if you're struggling, what do you want? What are you willing to do to get there? Why do you want it? Be able to articulate that. And then ask yourself, what phase of life am I in? Because it can be something that actually does feel aligned. But for example, if you want to lose body fat and you're getting married in 2 weeks, Bridezilla, it's not happening. You've got cake tastings, you've got bridal showers. Enjoy your life for right now. It's not a bad goal, but let's revisit it at a time where it's more conducive to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's a brilliant approach, because the analogy that comes to mind, at least for me, was, people would running a small business, whatever, they hire a consultant that has this MBA, would be my analogy. And they come in and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so smart. They looked at everything and they put together this plan, and it's sure there's some intelligence there. I'm not trying to knock people in MBAs, but it's not that they're that smart. It's that if you're running your business, to use this analogy, you're looking like right at it every day. And what they do is zoom out and look at 90 days, 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5-year plans. I would say the same thing with a new client and working with a coach is like, yeah, I'm gonna lose 50 pounds this summer. I'm gonna lose 50 pounds this next 5 months. There's a wedding in November. Fill in the blank. Okay, well, let's crack open the schedule. Like, oh, well, you have 4 trips. You have your one child plays travel soccer, and you're going to be out of town these other 3 weekends. What else is a barrier? Let's get all that out, and then let's reassess the goal. Is that goal in line with, like you just said, I think it's brilliant lifestyle. So to zoom out and look at the big picture of your goal and then recalibrate if you need to, or no, I can make it happen, but hey, coach, here's how I'm gonna have to adjust my approach at these times. So I think those are all things that people should look at more, the long approach, and what does it look like, and what barriers are kind of right around the corner, versus like, I'm excited, I'm motivated today, so I'm doing it today, and nothing's going to pull me off. Yes, it will. Life's going to pull you off.
Right.
We all got the perfect plans, right? But that's not
right.
Really
yeah, my mom used to always give me advice. My mom was a C-suite executive for Disney for 25 plus years. And when I was evaluating a new job or moving to a new city or attending a different program or whatever it may be, she always said, before you make this decision, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to spend 30 minutes. I want you to picture what it looks like waking up to brush your teeth, getting ready for this job. And what are you wearing every single day? And when the clock hits 5, are you clocking out, or are you still working until some nights 9, 10 at night? Are you stressed and thinking about the next calendar day and you're meeting with your superior? Do you have a superior? All the things, right? And I think it's important that we walk clients through that too on their coaching journey. When I have someone who actually begins with me, I create a PDF called a destination postcard.
Nice.
And what that PDF is it's so easy for people to get on a discovery call with someone and to say, in 6 months, Maddy, I want to be, like you said, down 40 pounds. I want to have regular cycles restored. I want to be able to do 20 pull-ups, and I want to be a size 2. Awesome. You're feeling fired up because this is day one. And in fact, you'll probably feel fired up for the next 2 weeks too. But what I need to do is I need to anchor you into, I call lily pads, little lily pads to get us to the opposite side of the river. What does month one look like? Because if we don't focus on what is a quality protein, how are we going to get you from 5.5 hours of broken sleep to 7.5? How are we going to get you going number 2 every single day? Then we are never going to get to that 50-pound weight loss goal. And that has been the kink in your system. Is you have this egregious gargantuan goal, but you don't have the lily pads in place to get to the other side of the bend.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Yeah, I think it's great how you have that onboarding journey and just walking them through not just, macros and just plugging things in. Those things are important, but just overall, like, what is the life? What is the goal? Is the goal realistic? Is it attainable? Does it fit into your current flow? Or is it just like, this super high, which is great. You're motivated, you're pumped up, but you don't have the neurotransmitters to keep creating that much pump up, we know from your GI map, right? To keep that going.
Usually there's a functional test or two in that roadmap as well.
Right. Of course. Well, speaking of functional tests, I was wondering, can you just talk through, high level, what is the Dutch test? What type of testing do you use in what application? And then maybe kind of get into some of the details there.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I had returned back to, I kind of referenced at the beginning of our podcast, my roots, if you will, I definitely took a more grounded scientific lens that blended both functional nutrition testing and nervous system work into my routine. And, as a result, I was feeling not just symptom free, but I was strong. I felt more in sync with my body. And there was a few tests that I had done personally to get myself there. And these are the same tests that I now offer a la carte, but I recommend for people that are dealing with things. And that is Dutch testing first and foremost. Joe, I'm sure there's different types of Dutch tests, right? We have like the Dutch Complete. We've got the cycle mapping. There's a few other ones in there. There's like the Dutch Plus. But the point is, what this is going to show us is detox pathways. It's a dried urine sample for our listeners out there. So it's not just showing what's free floating in your bloodstream, but it's showing what your body is eliminating. So we're actually seeing what the body is using. It's showing us all of your hormones, and it's a visual printout, so we can see gauges in relative amounts to one another. Cortisol. I love to share this example. The Dutch test is the one I'm going to spend the most time talking on, so bear with me here. But
take your time.
I am a basket case when it comes to labs. I pass out, cry, scream, all the things. So I have to take a little tiny baby anti-anxiety medication when I go in there, and I have to usually bring someone with me. Lo and behold, I would take my little baby anti-anxiety med. I would go into the doctors, get my blood drawn. And like I said, normally hormones were fine on paper. And my cortisol was too. Haven't had my coffee, haven't started my day. In fact, I had a late start to the day because I'd usually try to sleep in, took my anxiety med. Well, lo and behold, just so everybody knows, I was also on a cortisol adaptogen, something that helped my body to bring its cortisol down. And I'd take it first thing in the morning, gearing up for a stressful day. Well, I finally did a Dutch test after having some issues with that Calvin Klein hangover on my waistline, that fat tire syndrome. And it turns out my cortisol was low in the morning when it should have been elevated.
Right.
And when I was taking that adaptogen to bring down my cortisol, I was actually suppressing it further when I needed it to be, like I said, elevated. And guess when it was high? It was high at 4 p.m. when I had an hour left on the clock of my workday, and I was stressed to get around to everybody. And that is when my body needed the adaptogen. I would have never known had I not done a Dutch test, because it shows your cortisol at 4, 5, if you wake up in the middle of the night, points across the day. Big advocate for GI mapping, right? GI mapping, for those that are out there, that's going to show parasites, opportunistic versus commensal bacteria, the good versus the bad bacteria. We talked a little bit about probiotics. That's really going to shed light. This section of the GI map will shed light on that. We'll see H. pylori, candida, various digestive markers if you've got an issue with gluten, leaky gut, dysbiosis. Also had an interesting thing happen myself with the GI map. I was very food focused, and macros were high enough for me to, I shouldn't need more food. Turns out I had a low strain of a bacteria called Akkermansia. Akkermansia is what we know to be, it's kind of like nature's Ozempic is what it's being coined as now, but it helps with metabolic function. It helps with food focus and appetite regulation. So supplemented with Akkermansia, don't go doing it if you already have enough. We don't know that yet until you test, but
Right.
GI mapping. And then I can run through just the other three really quickly, but mycotox panels is a mold test that I really like. The only food sensitivity test that I personally do is the US Biotech food sensitivity test. I like that one. And then GeneSight Pro as well. That's a genetic test that can give insight into your different gene SNPs and even your body's propensity to respond to certain medications.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the additional testing because I do. There's a food sensitivity and allergy testing that I like, but I'll definitely have to check out the some of the gene ones because I've been looking at some different alternatives there for sure. I did want to just circle back for a minute on a couple points you made. So one was the cortisol / adaptogens, like as you mentioned, right? Like cortisol is not inherently bad. It's just the timing of when your cortisol is released. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, as well as is your body producing enough or too much? And then how to correct that, as you mentioned, doing things different in the morning versus the evening, and then how to address that. Because I think it's, yeah, very well said how you put out people are doing things for stress management to gear up for a stressful day, but they may actually need the cortisol to get through the day or earlier in the day, and then kick in their adaptogen at the right time when it's supposed to drop down. But I've seen a lot of, over the counter, some just general lifestyle modifications that, can improve quite a bit of their cortisol imbalances and just kind of help things get squared away in that.
Well, and it's like, you can't blame the patient that gets up in the morning and goes, oh my God, I need coffee. I'm already stressed. I'm so tired, and it's like, okay, what you actually may need in the morning is not coffee. You may actually need, again, don't do this. I'm not telling everybody to take this because if you've got a blood pressure issue, it's going to throw you into a cascade. You might need licorice root in the morning to wake those adrenals up and get you going. And you might actually need PS 150 in the evening. It's like, but nobody would know. And I don't blame anybody for not knowing, because conventionally speaking, you wake up in the morning, you're tired, you supplement with a little bit of caffeine, you feel a little bit better for the time being.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned too, just the smallest modification to your approach. It's one of the things I'm kicking myself because I'm not consistent enough yet. So I'm gonna say yet. So there's still hope. But I was doing great about a year ago. Where every day walking, and in the morning, and it just helped regulate things as basic and cliche as it sounds. It really does work. Getting that vitamin D going, getting the sun, nature, clearing my head, like letting the body kind of just wake up instead of just diving into work, which I do right now too much. So it's a good, that's why I like these podcasts, a good reminder for my own accountability as well.
You and I talked about the notion of a teacher, and I do not get frustrated with anybody who can't stay consistent when someone tells them what to do. I know I have some clients that probably roll their eyes when I tell them why they should be doing it, but you are not expected to do anything unless you understand the science so you can be bought into the process of your own journey, right? No coach should be holding your hand and running in front of you. They should be standing beside you and going, okay, we're going to go do this together. Here's why.
Right. Yeah. No, well put. On the topic of the Dutch testing, I wanted to unpack one more analogy that some people may have heard me use before, but like estrogen dominance, for an example. One of the things I had happen, and this is how I found Dutch testing, some of the more advanced diagnostics, is I was working with brilliant physicians about 6, 7 years ago, early on my journey in the more functional medicine space. And my wife was producing low estrogen in her blood work, but she had estrogen dominant symptoms. Doesn't make any sense, right?
Mm.
And then we figured out, so started some therapies, testosterone was low, some other things were off. Started some therapies and just went haywire, like horrible side effects. Dosing was off, really, really bad. So it's like, oh, this isn't for me, right? So you fast forward, you go, wait a minute, it's got to be something. So I go to this conference. Back then, it's Precision Analytics who does Dutch testing, and I see they have a booth. I start, well, what is this? Where am I going with this? So the point is, once we ran the Dutch test, we found that the methylation pathways were blocked. And so the analogy that I would use is like, it's like if you had a sink running and the bottom's clogged, even if the water is on, the faucet's on really low, eventually it's going to overflow. And that's what was happening with her symptomology. And it was like, ping, as soon as those pathways cleared, the top down, like taking the therapies, because now they're clearing the body in a more consistent, it was just like, voila, like you would have thought it was like a fake commercial, not just her, but other people I've seen happen this, but where once they cleared those pathways, it was just like, the song starts playing, like, I can see clearly, it's like, just like, oh my gosh. And I think it's just so important that people, even if they're going through, perhaps they might not be, well, I'm not that old, I'm not perimenopause, I'm 30 whatever. I had a friend tell me the other day, I'm like, well, maybe it's your methylation pathways, maybe you're just not clearing those hormones, the byproducts that I don't know until we test. But I just wanted to bring that up because some women in particular, some men, but they'll go on a therapy, and then if it's not clearing and they get all these side effects, well, it just doesn't work for me. And it's like, well, that's not really how that works. Like, there's something else happening. There's a step 2 here that we just have to figure out. And I think people should rest assured that we have enough tools, we have enough tests to where there's really not much we can't find out that's wrong with someone or off to help fix them, fix the natural things. But you were going to say something, so.
No. When you were referencing the sink, I was mentored by a doctor. Her name's Dr. Carrie Jones, and she's heavily involved with Dutch testing and
Yeah, I've spoken with her before.
Love her. And she used to give the example to us of, like, I'm sure you've seen it on SpongeBob or one of those cartoons. It's like the boat that has little leaks, and like, when you're seeing the water like coming out from all over the boat, and then all of a sudden the boat just explodes with this flood.
Yeah.
And I can, you see the patient that's like, oh, this isn't working, new clinic, this isn't working, new doctor, this isn't working, holistic doctor, this isn't working, acupuncturist, and they're plugging all these holes. Eventually all the tape comes off, the pipes burst, big old flood. The other thing that I wanted to piggyback on was something that you mentioned about having low estrogen yet still having estrogen dominance. I do see this a lot. You can have low estrogen and low progesterone. We're not saying that you don't have low things even if you're dominant, even if you're estrogen dominant. It's about the ratio of those things.
Right.
So that's really where, again, the Dutch testing can really help, because we can see the ratios in a nice clean printout and on fans and on a graph.
Yeah, and I know some people out there might roll their eyes like, you're a guy, why are you saying this? But I've been around it forever. But I really like cycle mapping, because I'd see the estrogen progesterone relationship, and I'm like, oh, does your bleed pick back up a second time at this point? They're like, how did you know that? I'm like, well, it's right here. I'm like, it's like, I'm not that smart. Like, I'm not a wizard, it's just like, oh, you mentioned this and this, like, is it around this time in your cycle? They're like, yeah. They're like, what is, I'm like, yeah, it's right here. So I think these tests are not, how do I say, and the way they produce them, if someone like me can understand them, where it's very clear, like the visual graphs and the detail that they provide, which as you know, so it's super awesome to go through those. And yes, it's an investment up front, but then the rest of the time you're just so much more dialed into everything you're doing, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to move on just as we kind of wind down some things here. I did want to touch base on one of the quotes I believe I had here, or statements list. Listen to whispers before they become shouts. So we're talking a little bit about fatigue there. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, I love that. That's been one of my goals for myself, I think, in the last 365 days, is really paying more attention just in all areas of my life to whispers so that I don't need to hear the shout. And in the context of this call, and in the case of functional nutrition and functional medicine, what I'm referencing there is really fatigue. Fatigue, for example, it's not about I'm tired. And I see this a lot with busy moms and C-suite executives and even young entrepreneurs and just young women. But fatigue is your body that's actually waving a white flag, asking for help. If you keep pushing through these little moments of fatigue without listening, those whispers that I'm tired and need a coffee turns into a shout. And it turns into the girl that was me at one time, pulling up to the gym and all of a sudden just crying for no reason and can't go in. Gut issues, hormonal dysregulation, total system depletion. And I know firsthand that you cannot repair and solve and correct stage 4 adrenal insufficiency in under 12 months time. It's impossible. So yes, sometimes, if you are struggling and I don't just want to see fatigue through rose-colored glasses, because I think sometimes the word fatigue can also be like a blanket term or an excuse for inconsistency.
Sure.
Sometimes we do have a consistency issue. Sometimes we have a discipline issue. Sometimes we have an issue perhaps identifying and getting down to the crux of self-sabotage, or maybe those areas where we're experiencing some resistance. But if you're truly fighting chronic fatigue, it's not about trying harder. Instead, it's about getting curious. And so that's where we don't guess and we test. We got to look at what internal systems here might be bottlenecked. We got to look at adrenal function, mitochondrial health, thyroid, blood sugar, inflammation, gut. When your body, like we talked about earlier, Joe, when your body doesn't feel safe, motivation won't fix that.
Right.
So, in our world, something that you and I really share is that fitness is not about forcing, but it's about alignment. And that's what we seek to create.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. One thing I wanted to kind of round out the episode today with is if you could talk a little bit, just high level, what is functional nutrition / medicine in your own words? Like, what does it mean to you? Like, how do you define that in your approach?
Yeah, I think that, the definition for me is in the root of that phrase, functional nutrition, right? There's a twinge there of your business optimization that I want to reference, but it's all about how can we use diet first and things that are free to us, diet, nervous system regulation, exercise and movement, recovery modalities. How can we use those to help someone to function more optimally? And then, it goes beyond that. We want to layer in that educational component, right? So why are we choosing certain foods and maybe perhaps turning a cheek to some yellow light or red light foods? Why are we taking certain supplements? We're not taking them to mask a problem when we're approaching a situation from a lens or an approach that lends itself to functional nutrition or functional wellness. We're taking them because we can't get sufficient amounts of them from our food, or because we are in a season, and I want to emphasize that's a set period of time where the body needs a little bit of extra support, whether that's opening up detox pathways like we talked about earlier, awakening a certain system so it can do it on its own, or just supporting the body. So functional nutrition, functional medicine, functional wellness, all of those things come back to doing the minimum in order to get the maximum for our functional body to get us to function optimally.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's great. I think that's one of the key differences, right, to the functional approach versus a more transactional or immediate symptom relief is what is the minimum effective dose, even if you're going to be on a therapy, if you need
Yeah.
one, or what is the minimum
Mhm.
effective dose of whatever the case may be for your solution. So, well, I really appreciate you coming on. I think there's a lot to take away from today. I'm excited for this episode to be released soon here. How can people find you, Maddy? We're going to have it in the show notes, of course, and in all of the promotional materials we put out. But if you could share for the audience out there, where can I find you at?
Yeah, well, you can find me a lot of places. I have an Instagram page. It's Mads, Mads, Michie, Michie Fitness, and that's also my YouTube channel. I have a podcast myself that, Joe, I hope that you will be on soon. It's called The Psyche Behind the Physique on both Apple and Spotify. And then
Awesome.
my website, which is www.m, just the letter M, powered, Powered, coachingcollective.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again for joining us. Definitely a lot of great information out here for everyone listening in. And for everybody out there too, be sure to like, comment, share the episode, and don't be shy. Like, send us your messages, whether it's emails, the comments. I will link up with Maddy and try to get those answers for you quickly. As well as in the future, we are going to be working on some live Q&A sessions on the channel, and we'll have open invites to many of our experts that have been on the podcast if they either want to join us or if they want to answer some questions post podcast. We'll be publishing those Q&As as well. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. And thanks, Maddy, for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure. So appreciate it.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you guys.